KTN. As we get into an electoral conversation this morning, we will be having that conversation with Advocate Elias Mutuma, and he's here with us in the studio. Good morning.
Morning to you, Ndu, and pleasure to meet you.
It's nice to meet you finally.
I've been here twice. Last time you were missing in action. I only met City and Eric. It's good to meet you as well, Mark, and City well again.
So now you had to go and out me here. No. Twice and a half.
Sorry, I had to.
Don't apologize. It happens to all of us.
Okay.
There are times they're guests here and one of us isn't. It happens. It happens.
Yeah.
Sure.
But great to have you here all the same.
Asante.
And even as we do, we're going to throw, you may or you may not have one, but City wants to tell you about how you can get a mortgage quick, easy.
Okay.
And for a long time with fixed interest rates, and you don't have to change anything. It sounds like magic, I know, but he's got the tea.
I'm all ears.
How do you afford a mortgage without bankrupting yourself? Without straining yourself financially? Or how do you get a mortgage that fits within your financial ability? See, Diamond Trust is saying this. They have a mortgage plan designed specifically for you. And they're saying that if you want to borrow, you have a salary, you are in business, they have plans that will consider where it is that your money is coming from and how much money you actually have or how much money you can actually spend, how much money you can spare. If you want a mortgage for 10 years, they say, look, at 9%, you will be able to get a mortgage. If you want it for 25 years, they say, look, 9.75%. You will not be penalized for paying early. There are institutions who, should you pay early, there are penalties. I've never understood that really. Why you penalize me for giving you money early? I've never understood it, but there it is. But they're saying, look, none of that will happen, and there'll be no hidden charges, okay? The key thing, when you're talking about a mortgage and you're talking about the means you have, don't be afraid. You come and talk to us and tell us what it is that you have in mind, and then we'll tell you the plans we have and how our plans can fit in with your ability and the means you have. All you need to do is really very simple, okay? You will want to either visit the nearest Diamond Trust Bank outlet, or you will want to email mortgages at dtbafrica.com. Let me repeat that. You want to email mortgages at dtbafrica.com to get started. It's as simple as that.
There you go.
Yes.
And that's how to get into it. Stuff to think about, isn't it?
I will. Thank you.
So, Wakili, good morning again and welcome. So the thing is that CT welcomed you with a mortgage, but he also has a proverb that he would like to tell you. And then you can tell us, you guys are in the business of, telling us the message behind the message. So maybe you can then, how would you interpret the proverb? And then you can let us know about that.
Thank you.
Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Djibouti. In dancing with the enemy, one follows his footsteps, even if counting under one's breath.
Okay.
Let me repeat it. In dancing with the enemy, one follows his footsteps, even if counting under one's breath.
I like it a lot. It's quite insightful. My understanding of that proverb is that when you're close to your enemy, because dancing means that there is a very close proximity with your enemy, one, you should strive to learn who they really are, what weapons they have against you, and therefore you're able to prepare yourself for any eventuality in case of any attack. But even as you do that, as you learn them, you should also be careful enough not to reveal your own moves. That's why it talks about you counting your moves, or rather their moves, in whispers.
Right.
So my understanding is that you should really be very discreet with your plans, with your strategy, so that you're able to strike when they least expect.
Okay. There you go. When they least expect.
Spoken like a true lawyer. Serving divorce papers.
Thank you.
All right. So I mean, it's good. So I mean, just jumping into it this morning. Constitutionalism is something that many nations struggle with in terms of now how do you then take this, what the law says you must do, what the supreme law of any land says you must do, and actually bringing it down to implementation and seeing then how it becomes alive, because that's what they keep saying, you know, that it's a document that it is alive. There are certain things within it that you must implement and put, you know, into action. Now, one of the issues that has met us front and center is the constitution of an IEBC. The last time there was a fully fledged functional IEBC was towards the general election in 2022 in Kenya, you know, around about until, you know, the end of August. Now, and I say fully functional deliberately because we know that the issue has been commissioners of the IEBC then being absent, but the IEBC as a commission has still been functioning because there are people who continue to do the work of electoral and boundaries commissioning issues. Now, to bring in commissioners has been an issue because how do you have an election without commissioners? We have very many areas in the country whereby, for one reason or another, an appointment, an unfortunate death, there has not been a member of parliament, a member of county assembly, and an election could not be held because the commission does not have commissioners. Now, fast moving towards an election year in just under 2 years now, that you're going to have these people in place in order to have a credible election carried out in Kenya, again, under the constitution. Finally, there's been a task. Are they a task force or are they a panel? They're a panel.
Selection panel.
Thank you. So now there's a selection panel which will essentially bring about the 7 new commissioners into the IEBC. Now, we're going to start off with that, Wakili, because the questions are around what exactly will this panel be looking for that would then bring in these new commissioners, and what under constitutionalism then must they follow?
Thank you. You are right that the last time we had a fully constituted IBC was months to the general elections in 2022. But even before then, we had stayed for a whole 2 years with only 3 commissioners. And I remember one of the issues that we were battling with at the Supreme Court in the BBI case, which I was privileged to be part of, was whether the actions by the 3 commissioners who had been in place for a whole 2 years were legal because of lack of quorum. Then how are we in the same place again? Because now it's been almost a year, we do not have commissioners at all. There has been this tendency to oversimplify the role played by IEBC to just reduce it to the management and conduct of elections once after every 5 years. But when you look at the provisions of Article 88 and 89, the role played by IEBC is a continuous one that does not necessarily begin and end with the conduct of general elections. We're talking about voter registration. We are talking about voter education. We are talking about regulating the conduct of political parties. We are talking about the very important issue of delimitation of boundaries. All that is an exercise that cannot be put to a stop. It has to be continuous. So IEBC does not just exist for the purposes of conducting elections. Today, the Supreme Court is going to render an advisory opinion as to whether the Secretariat of the IEBC can perform certain duties in the absence of commissioners. Therefore, we should then take blame as a country as to why we do not have an IBC, because various duty bearers, the executive, judiciary, political parties, the media itself, we have not been very robust in demanding for a fully constituted IBC as and when it should have been constituted. And I'm saying this considering that when you look at the provisions again of the first schedule of the IEBC Act, it anticipates 6 months before the exit of the commissioners, the recruitment exercise must have commenced. So we should not have waited until this very last hour for us to put in place a selection panel, for it to conduct the interviews and recruitments when we have commissioners already having left the scene.
It's been said that there are political intrigues that are at play here, and I don't think there's speculation, but we can see the speculations hitting us right in the face. That what would be the reason as to why one would not want an IEBC to be put in place? We have had conversations here in this room about why the word independent then comes into question, because political parties are involved in who gets selected. Political parties have their say. And so if the people who are playing in the match can also serve as referee, then one would ask, is this game actually being played fairly? But above and beyond that, by the time you are looking at a situation whereby a by-election needs to happen because you have appointed another individual and removed them from that place of representation, for example, the people of Ugenya do not have a representation for 6 months now, what happens to them? Under the Constitution, have their rights not been abrogated? The people of Kacheliba, the people of Suba, with no representation, nominated or otherwise, who now have no representation. I believe that the Constitution itself said that within 90 days of the exit of an individual from a particular position, that by-election ought to have happened. Now, if the ingredients for a by-election to happen do not exist, then the onus then lies upon whom? And this is my question. Because you say we all have a responsibility, but there must be somebody with a direct responsibility to ensure that those ingredients are in place for a by-election to happen. Otherwise, you're in breach of the Constitution. Yes? No?
Well, I agree, but I'm also very keen not to point a finger on just one individual or one institution, because we have multiple stakeholders in the constitution of IEBC. One of such individuals or institutions is the executive, because the moment there is a vacancy in the office of the commissioners, then it is upon the president to declare a vacancy in that.
It is the president who is to declare.
It is the blessed president who is supposed to declare that vacancy.
Why?
That's what the law says.
The Constitution says.
That is what the Constitution says.
Yes, the president must.
He is the duty bearer.
He is the duty bearer to that extent.
In fact, for most commissions, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
that's what our law says.
That is what the law says. Okay. But therefore, the moment the president declares the seat vacant, that sets into motion several other steps to be undertaken, which now is not in control of. I am aware that the president declared those vacancies as being vacant. Then what then should follow is the selection of the nomination of the selection panel to do that. And then we have stakeholders who are supposed to contribute into the appointment of the selection panel. We have the LSK, we have the Interreligious Council, we have political parties, we have so many other stakeholders. In our instance, where was the delay? Who dropped the ball? Yes, the president declared the vacancy, but political parties could not agree on who to appoint.
Why don't you walk us through this? Huh?
Yes.
President declares vacancy. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
What are these things that are supposed to happen to the point where you actually get to have this by-election?
Very well. So the president will declare the seat vacant, and then he will nominate his appointees to the selection panel. He will also invite other stakeholders, LSK, political parties, Interreligious Council, and so many others, to also present their names. Once those names have been presented to the president, then it is upon the president to gazette the selection panel, so that the selection panel now takes over the process of recruitment. So in this instance, you are aware that one of the political parties nominated their representative to the selection panel. Then we withdrew that person and then replaced that person with another person, causing the person who had previously been nominated to move to court, and then sought conservatory orders to stop the president from gazetting the selection panel. So that's where the problem has been. And that's why, at that juncture, the blame must be with the political party and the judiciary, because the judiciary ought to have risen to the occasion to understand the urgency of the matter and, expeditiously deal with this matter, render a judgment, and allow the process to continue.
Riddle me this.
Yes.
There's of course been a delay, but we are aware that there are also certain timelines that must be met, an amount of time before the next election. So tell us, one, are we late legally in anything that should be done before 2027? Forget about the by-elections, which we are already late for, but the timeline 2027, how many obstacles or timelines have we missed or are in danger of missing?
One, we are in deep breach of the Constitution. Because when you look at Article 88, there are those continuous functions that must continue. One of those is voter registration, which is a continuous exercise. It does not have to wait until the mass registration that happens months or weeks to election. So that has been overtaken and has been delayed. The other issue, of course, is the all-important issue of delimitation of boundaries, which was supposed to have happened by at least March 2024. Because the last time we had that delimitation exercise was in 2012. The law anticipates that within the interval of 8 and 12 years from the last delimitation, that exercise should be conducted.
What is this delimitation?
Delimitation is a fresh naming and identification of boundaries, so that instead of the 290 constituencies, we could have more or less.
Based on what exactly?
Based on quota population. There is a whole scientific formula under Article 89, so that each constituency should not have more than, I think, 72,000 voters.
Each constituency?
Each constituency.
Should not have more than 72?
72,000.
Okay.
So that, but the law also allows...
So we are saying that right now in Kenya, there are no constituencies that have more than 72,000.
The last time those boundaries were identified was 14 years now. Okay? Of course, populations are not as they were in 2012. So you have places where you have either overrepresentation or underrepresentation, which is a core right. Because if you have one constituency that has 140, how does one member of parliament serve? So how does an MCA serve?
So how do you get this overrepresentation?
Because we keep on having increase in population.
So, no. The underrepresentation, I can understand.
Yes.
There are very many people.
Yes.
You are one.
Overrepresentation is that we have areas that are also underpopulated.
Yes.
So you have less than 72,000. Met by one member of parliament, for example.
Yeah, some of those areas also tend to have some huge land masses.
Yeah. Yes. That's why I'm saying there is a whole scientific formula,
yes,
which must be put in place before you determine what a boundary should be of a particular constituency. So that is one of the functions that has been overtaken by events.
I have to ask you something,
yes.
Wakili. The mentions that you hear, that delimitation of boundaries and also voter registration and education, do these two functions require that you have commissioners of the IEBC in place to have them done?
When you look at the issue of, for instance, voter registration, it's an exercise, in my view, that does not need the commissioners to be in place.
Okay.
However, that exercise of voter registration had been gazetted by the commissioners. Subsequently, that gazette was pulled down, and therefore we lacked a second gazettement, which can only be done by a commissioner or the chairman of the commission.
Okay.
So what lacked is not the people to do the registration,
Right.
but the person to declare that exercise as being open
Okay.
by way of gazettement.
So let me open this up a little bit.
Yes.
Essentially, when we talk about voter registration and voter education, what you're doing is that you're bringing in numbers of individuals who will then be able to go to the ballot in an election year. And what you're also doing is educating people on the different things that they need to know about the electoral process, whether it is the act of voting or whether this individual who sits in a member of county assembly, these are their functions. The person who sits in a member of parliament, these are their functions, up and all the way until the president. Essentially, that is what you are letting Kenyans know about on a regular basis. So, should you not declare as an individual that this process then can go on? And that you're saying that in order for that declaration to happen, that you need an individual to then declare that process now open. What you do is that you delay the process, right? And that if you then decide that you will have a selection panel which will finally have this done, then maybe we come into 2026 now with a fully constituted IEBC, and then you do not have enough time to get as many people as would have registered or have been educated on electoral matters before you have an election the next year. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I see. And apart from that, you also rob the commission of a very crucial element, the institutional memory. Because you're bringing in place completely new individuals who have no idea how elections are conducted. They have no reference. If we had at least 3 or 4 commissioners in place, then the others who come in would, have it easy to understand the process. But assuming the selection panel is able to discharge its duty, and I have no doubt they will, within the next 90 days. So we're looking at June or July, thereabout. You'll have the whole process of orientation, bring them up to speed, them understanding how things work here and there. So we are talking at another 6 months from June being, consumed into just trying to ensure that they learn what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
How are they supposed to do that? 1 year or within such a short period of time?
Would we be overly speculative if we said this looks as though it could be something of design?
Well, anyone could be forgiven for thinking that way. And I am saying that because just like a pregnancy, an election is definite. We know when it will happen. All right? You do not come in the maternity ward at the 40th week and start fundraising to get money to discharge the patient. All right? When we saw in the commissioners, we knew when their term would lapse by a fraction of time. It was very clear that their term was not going to be extended. The law anticipates that 6 months before they exit, begin that process of recruitment. If there are any disputes to be arbitrated upon, that was the time to do that. So we are talking about Chibukati's team left January 2024.
Yes.
So we are talking about June 2023. We should have begun this process so that if there's any dispute, we deal with it way in advance.
Okay, we didn't. Are we on to a break?
Yes, let's take a break, because now that we didn't take those things into consideration, then what would be some of the ramifications? Am I? Okay. Assuming what your question would be. Okay. We're talking this hour with Wakili Elias Mutuma. And we're saying, okay, so, right, a new selection panel has been put in place. Bring in new commissioners and let's get this ball rolling. But then what are the dangers of not having done that before? And so we'll look into that when we take this break and come back. But let me remind you that under the 2G Ajiri program by the KCB Foundation, what you can do is ensure that if you don't have the skills that you need and you're between the age of 18 and 35, that you can get into a 6-month course training program in various disciplines. And then you can come out on the other end of it with a toolkit, armed on one side and armed on the other side with a little bit of cash to get into a world whereby you have a fighting chance to make it, thanks to the 2G Ajiri program under the KCB Foundation. That's www.kcbgroup.com/foundation. Good morning.
always have news of tradition and things we need to follow. The trading bell, however, will always have news of precision, where industry makers and market movers have their stories to tell.
We want to exit some of the companies to the capital market so that we can deepen the market.
The thing about leadership is you're doing everything, but I think what's not seen is a very strong support team that on a day-to-day basis enables you to do well.
The performance of the shilling has a direct bearing on inflation because we import quite significantly the amount of goods that we consume in this country.
So tune in every Tuesday night where industry movers and market shakers have their stories to tell that happened right here at the Bauhaus.
That second starts now.
Time travel.
Time travel.
The Ramas work on 10 points. We clap for them. Timpangilio wa maonesho the couples game show.
All gonna nijibu nini na tumeona change.
Niko tu hapo.
Sawa.
Hivi kibao sako kwa nyumba.
Shapita na liko shapata pole. Na kama uko pale nyumbani na ungelipenda kuungana na sisi, unatuandikia tu SMS kwa 22151 ama
When you look at the timetabling and everything we're discussing, I need clarity as to, okay, you have a secretariat. What do they do? You have a commission. What do they do? And why is the focus so much on the commission? And yet the functions of the IEBC have continued because they have a secretariat. The third question I will ask after these first two have been answered.
Thank you. So what happens to a duty bearer who sleeps on his job or her job and allows us to be in a crisis or in a debacle such as the one we are facing? That individual or that institution or whoever it is can be brought book various ways. And one of them would be by declaring that they are in violation of the Constitution. Then the institution that is charged with that mandate, being the court, will render its pronouncement on the kind of remedy. And here I'm saying it's not just one individual. We have the political parties, we have the executive, we have the judiciary. So it's sort of, a blame on almost every stakeholder that is involved, whether by design or by sheer ignorance. But we are here. The commission is run by two distinct bodies. We have the Secretariat and the commissioners. The Secretariat is the engine of the commission. The commissioners are the drivers. For as long as the engine is functioning properly, all you need is for a driver to take the driver's seat with a clear roadmap, with a clear support, and then be able to move the vehicle to the next destination. And therefore, I want to think that the Secretariat, having been in place in perpetuity, that they have already put in place a very clear roadmap, just waiting for the commissioners to take the driver's seat and drive this vehicle. It is not fair for us to assume that nothing has been happening. And it is for that reason that the Secretariat moved to the Supreme Court and sought an advisory from the Supreme Court, asking it, can we do this thing on our own without the commission, without the commissioners? Therefore, I want to believe that they already have, all the frameworks and roadmaps in place. All now we need is for the selection panel to give us very efficient drivers, people who are able to quickly learn, people who are quickly able to adapt to the situation, people who can withstand pressure, because there will be a lot of it. They will be blamed a lot for not being efficient when it was not their fault. So apart from, the legal requirements under the IEBC Act and the Constitution, they need to settle on men and women who are of integrity and people who know the kind of crisis we are in.
I have a problem with that statement.
Yes.
Every time we talk about such matters in this country, even with regards to electing our members of parliament, we talk about people of integrity. Since when have we willfully elected people who don't have integrity? When?
We must give the selection panel the benefit of doubt.
Yes,
and,
we
and,
do.
and City, we have a stake, we have a say in all this. So should anyone be then appointed or be nominated for this process who you feel is not a person of integrity, we have ways of ensuring that is rectified before the fact.
City, one of the things that amazes me with Kenyan election cycles and these IEBC things is every time it becomes more and more unnecessarily complicated, as though complication is the remedy to our perennial election process. I'll give you a basic example. The national government gives out birth certificates, gives out IDs and certificates of death. But you can't use your ID to vote. You have to do another process to be registered as a voter using your ID. You understand the irony? We make it difficult that we have electronic and manual from 34. And for me, the reason why this whole thing is troublesome is we've created something that is so simple, which is counting 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 72,000, and then made it such a complicated issue that now we need people of almost angelic qualities to be able to just run a commission whose job is to count people. All right, count votes if you
No,
prefer.
it's people.
Yeah.
Because votes represent people. Though in this country, we do wonders when it comes to the votes can represent themselves.
And they can also count themselves.
Yes.
Well, you've seen other countries conduct their elections even through mails.
Yes.
It's very simple. But are we those people? Are we able to do that?
Yes, we are.
Even as we look for people of integrity to manage our elections, are we the voters also people of integrity?
There's a difference between capability and desire.
Yes.
The capability means that you, as in if somebody puts you down to it, can you move your finger from here to here? Yes, we can. Do we have that innate desire to make sure that the system actually works? I think then we're dealing with something completely different. Because those countries you speak of don't have commissions. Their elections are run by volunteers who they finish the thing, they pack up their bags, and then they go home, and then it's taken, and then the college declares who has won. Individuals come out and they say, we're going to offer our time. The state provides the resources. We offer our time. They do the thing, done, dusted, we go home.
I think it's because the way the whole subject of elections has been, instilled in us is that it's a matter of life and death. Okay? And therefore, most people will want to go out of their way to manipulate the results of the elections, including the voters themselves.
But Kili, is it really life and death?
That's what we've been made to believe.
It is life and money.
Yeah.
Because, yes, it is. The competition is not in and of itself the issue. It is the benefits, which can be counted in Kenyan shillings, that is anticipated, that makes it as competitive as it is. And so we look at it and we look at the competition. That is an outcome.
Yes.
At the heart of it, there is the profit-centered business that we have in our politics, where it is bigger than any industry. We are one of those few countries where you don't need to be a businessman, you just need to be a politician to be rich.
Yes.
We understand this, and that is why people want to be elected. So, when we talk about people of integrity, we need to be fair to the country also. This yardstick that people keep quoting, Singapore, America, we are not in Singapore, neither are we in America, we are in Kenya.
Yes.
Okay? And since we understand ourselves, we will look for people of supposed integrity, but they must be held to account.
Yeah.
If we, the citizenry, don't do that, it doesn't matter how much integrity, how many lorry loads of integrity they come in with, it will dissipate.
And we cannot lay our trust on the complexity of our electoral system. That's a mistake we make. It's like saying, because I have bought a new padlock, my business shall never be broken into. You know, they say in cybersecurity that if you're working on the security of matters, you have to find all the loopholes and block all of them. But if you're a hacker, you just need to find one.
So it's very easy for you to hack.
Yes. So the complexity of the process is not the solution. And that's something that Kenyans need to understand. Making it complex has never solved the problem. Holding these people to accountable and to account and being able to create transparency, which has a responsibility, will be very key.
And all our complexities come with a cost. Always.
Yeah. We run an election that is more expensive per head than India, and India has to count 1.2 billion voters. Okay, 800 million, but
still, we get your point. So, if those 2 points, and just trying to land it with this one as well, is that we get to the place whereby, sure, then you do have your commissioners, however many they will be, and then you now have a fully constituted IEBC. Can we really say that this commission would be truly independent if it takes into consideration the whims and the desires of political parties who we know in this country are not based on ideology but are based on individuals and their whims, but you take into consideration what they want in order for you to referee this match? Can this commission truly be independent if it is on the sidelines with some of the folks who are playing in the game at the same time? Is that possible?
I do not know whether it was a mistake for us to amend our law to ensure, in the name of inclusivity, that political parties have, a huge say in the selection, or rather in the nomination of the selection panel. In my view, I think that we ought to have remained focused to ensure that the men and women who are tasked with the appointment of the commissioners are independent, because that's where it must begin. Not from the commissioners, but from the process of appointing the commissioners themselves. But look, election is about stakes, and in stakes we have stakeholders. So it is not totally wrong, or there is nothing, so fundamentally injurious for you to have stakeholders have a say in who is to sit in that selection panel. But once the commission is in place, they must then understand that the Constitution protects them against influence, against manipulation from anyone. And there is nothing you're going to do about it if they decide that we're going to remain firm. Yes.
Which country are we in?
We're in Kenya, I agree.
The moment you have the sort of structure in selecting those who will be in the IEBC and what we're referring to as representation, how on earth can they be independent? How?
What would...
From the get-go, you have vested interest.
Yes.
Because of the people who have put your name forward.
Yes.
How on earth will you be independent?
And beyond that, they've put your name, number one, they've put your name forward. And I'm going to go back to the ideological base for political parties in Kenya. That we know that today, if I'm CT's progressive movement, then he and I split. You like that name, right?
I like the name, progressive movement forward.
Party. Then CT and I, for whatever reason, decide, okay, you know what? Ulisema utanipatia na we got. So then I say, you know what? It's over. I go. Then I go and form my own Fire and Spice party movement.
Yes.
Me. People will follow me. I have moved for me. I didn't move because suddenly I'm looking at issues of capitalism or I'm looking at issues of socialism, and on that ideology then we don't have a base party. We move for selfish political reasons and we form other parties. Those are the people now that are giving their input into how the commission then will be constituted. Do we not see that there's interest vested there? If I come and have a say in how you will referee the match. And I am one of the players. How?
Do you know, in fact, when you talk about politicians, the other day, there was an advertisement in the paper, the following person does not represent this company, blah, blah, blah. The comments underneath were, now it is time to launch your book about manifesting greatness and overcoming weakness. Then you run for political office, right? Yeah. You see, so these are the people we trust.
I still believe that despite the interest that are vested in an electoral process, despite the fact that the commissioners are appointed with a say from stakeholders, there is still a chance of one being appointed as a commissioner to remain independent. Why am I saying that? IEBC is not the only institution where you have, stakeholder engagement.
Exactly.
You have the judiciary, for instance. Yes, it is the Judicial Service Commission that appoints judges. But at the end of the day, the president has a hand in the final appointment of that judge. Does it necessarily then mean that the president will call the shots? You just need to, accept.
Wakili, the president is never given one name.
Yes.
He selects whether it's 2 or 3 names that are given, meaning any of those people could very well have been there. Now,
in fact, 9 names will be presented to the president. He will appoint 6.
Yes. Now,
yes.
When you look at the judiciary and what it is that they do, okay, different completely from what the IEBC is. These people are at the deep end of the nerve center of this country.
Yes.
And that's called the elections.
Correct.
It is virtually impossible. This is what I'm not saying tongue in cheek, I'm just saying it. For anyone who's appointed to be appointed without a mandate.
Yes.
You are given marching orders and you're told exactly what is expected of you. So
beyond what is expected, you are almost told what to do and how to do it.
In fact, let's not sugarcoat it. You are told who is to win.
Yes.
Yes.
And you're even given options of how they're supposed to win.
Yes.
So the independence that we speak of, if it is brought about by the system and the process we're talking about, it's counterintuitive. How? The moment we had political parties having a say, that independence went out of the window completely. Let me go back to the question I asked. Secretariat, what can they do without the commission? Can they register voters?
The Secretariat can definitely register voters because you do not expect commissioners to be at the constituency level or registration offices to do the actual registration. They do not do that.
But who declares the period of voter registration? Or is it something that's supposed to be ongoing?
Like I explained, when you look at Article 88, voter registration is a continuous process. It only stops and closed very close to the elections. When the when the voters register, is now supposed to be inspected and verified. So there is nothing that prevents the Secretariat from continuing with the process of registration. But in this scenario, the exercise of voter registration was gazetted after the elections, as it should be, by the chairperson of the commission. Soon thereafter, that gazette notice was withdrawn, I don't know for whatever reason. And therefore, what we lack right now is for another person who is mandated by law to just put up a gazette notice and say the process of voter registration has been opened. But it does not mean that the Secretariat could not proceed with the registration. If only we had that gazette notice, that process would have
Let me ask this question. I know many countries who that Secretariat appears 6 months to an election because there is nothing special about doing voter registration. And it is entirely possible to have people who are trained. If there's a by-election, you simply call the people who ran the election last time, they do it, and then they go home. The permanence of the IEBC in this country, and again, please don't tweet me saying I want you to be fired. But the permanence of the IEBC Secretariat in the large numbers it has speaks again to this overemphasis, overspending, overcomplication of our elections, which actually the net benefit for this country we've never reaped. From 2007 to date, we've not ever had an election where Kenyans are not baying for the blood of commissioners and their chairmen. So what exactly are we doing? Doing the same thing, expecting different results?
And that's why after every election, if my memory serves me right from 2007, after every election, we have electoral reforms. We have a new law in place. We have new commissioners in place. I mean, everything is new at every election cycle. And therefore, it defeats the whole purpose of having, a succession in perpetuity. Because you should have, a commission that runs through from day one all through to the next cycle and the other cycle for, number one, institutional memory, for, good practice. They should be in place all through. But like you've said, there is no magic in voter registration that requires that you should have these commissioners in place. What ought to have happened is a very simple exercise of moving to court as and when that gazette was withdrawn, and the court should have just given an advisory then that you can proceed with the voter registration without necessarily waiting for the commissioners to be in place. Having failed to do that, the judiciary itself is at fault. The secretary is at fault. Political parties are at fault. Everyone, city is at fault.
So it's a relay for faults.
Actually,
it's a relay for faults.
It could be, but I don't quite think that it is as complicated as it's being made to sound. Because this is not the first time we're having an election in this country. It is not the first time that we are having people who represent, who are part of a body which is similar to IEBC. We even changed the name of the
Electoral Commission
of Kenya. Yes, exactly. As if changing the name changes anything. But here we are, and we have a situation and a daunting task that this selection panel have been given. They will do their bit. The question is, will the citizenry do theirs?
And that's why we needed to have voter education taking place, so that at least we can change the mindset of the people, for them to also do their part. And they cannot do their part unless they understand the role they're supposed to play.
I see Mark shaking his
head. There's something, and as someone who practices communication, I really dislike that somehow education is supposed to change people. I want you to understand that professors in this city of Nairobi, where intelligence and experience should speak most, have stood in line to actually elect people who are non-prison escapees. Okay? So it's got nothing to do with education. But take a Kenyan today, in fact, take a matatu driver today, put him in a car in Dubai or Japan, the guy can behave. They don't even get 2 speeding tickets when they're there. The problem with Kenya is we've got a horrible culture and we refuse to face it. It's not that we are not educated.
How do we change that culture if we do not then instill it in our people? And instilling means somehow you've got to inform them.
But let's start
that
here.
good culture.
And we're saying that the people who will do the informing and the education have to be declared open in order for that to happen. And we sit here and then we wait and say, okay, let's see when that will happen. It seems as though there's a direct, trying to subvert that from happening so that people don't get educated about what they need to know.
2017, there was a ruling that there were illegalities and irregularities.
Correct.
So there were illegalities done, and the commissioners today are enjoying their retirement package without a hint of jail time, court case, or whatever. So who did the illegalities? In fact, we have someone who's very senior in this government who was found guilty of electoral malpractice.
I agree with you, Mark, completely. And it's not like we have a deficit of understanding as a Kenyan people, because when you look at the old woman in the village, they are able to send money through M-Pesa, through mobile money. They are able to operate their mobile gadgets very easily. So it's not like they do not understand, or they are not capable of understanding.
Sure.
What they need to know, or rather what needs to happen, is for in a very consistent way, keep them updated on what is happening, and they'll be able to play ball.
We need to keep talking. Wakili Elias Mutuma, thank you so much for being here this morning, walking us through some of these things necessary for us to keep, making our voices part of this conversation. Asante Sana. Reminding you that, there are ways to make payments. We'll talk about that when we come back. It's 9 a.m.